Hi, I'm Mr. Cellini, and today let's take a look at the Global History Regents. This time it's the CRQ section from August 2025. If you end up liking this video, be sure to check out my channel where I've got a ton of videos on all parts of the exam. Let's get into it. What I thought we would do for at least part of today is do one more CRQ. The reason being, the last couple of Regents exams, when I say last couple, I mean January 2026, August 2025, June 2025, some tricky questions have popped up. And when I say tricky, I mean ones that are like bias, intended audience, turning point, stuff like that. But one thing you will always see, and I don't see the test until you guys see the test. One thing you will always see is the concept of historical circumstances. So who can remind me, either my own guys or maybe any of you guys from last time, what this whole concept of historical circumstances means? What happened around it is good. Yeah, that's good. What else could it mean? Causes. What led to something else happening, okay? And I won't bog you down with reading every single part of these documents because we can learn a lot just from the name at the bottom. I cannot stress enough how important it is to look at that, because if you see that, even if you can't figure out what this document is about, if you can remember what you learned about in class about that guy, you could probably get this question right. So let's do some just straight up content review. Tell me about time period that goes with John Locke. Tell me about ideas. The Enlightenment is the time period. Beautiful. A time period where people kind of criticize the old and come up with new ideas about maybe government and society and try to solve some of our bigger problems. So tell me about John Locke's ideas specifically when it comes to Enlightenment stuff. He's your life, liberty, property guy, or life, liberty, land. Okay? Meaning natural rights. Meaning John Locke said all human beings are born with those three things. Given to all humans, he said, by God. Actually, he didn't technically say all humans. He said all men. Okay? And I think back then, I'm pretty sure that that's what they actually meant. Okay, men get this, men get that, and we'll talk about that later because someone's going to have a problem with it being just about men. We'll talk about her in a second. So, all men born with life, liberty, property. What does John Locke say you should do if you're denied any of those natural rights? Like, let's say a government is denying people liberty, which is code for freedom. What should those people do, according to John Locke? Rebel, right? So if you're a slave on a sugar plantation in Haiti, and you hear about John Locke's ideas, you might think to yourself, John Locke says I'm born with liberty. These guys tell me I have to work growing sugar for no pay in bad conditions. What will this motivate peoples around the world to do if they feel repressed? Not just rebel, but have full on, maybe a revolution and fight for democracy, right? Where if I have democracy, I make my own laws, right? And if I'm in power, I'm gonna make laws that protect my rights, not continue to oppress myself. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's basically what this document is about, right? People coming together to create governments that protect natural liberties. Obviously an advocate for democracy as well. He wants people to have a say in their own government. The majority have a right to act and conclude. It's just fancy for democracy, where a majority rules. For the sake of review, because this is all important stuff, and this is early in the school year where our memories are a little bit fuzzy. John Locke's not the only Enlightenment person. Give me another one. Who's Mr. Three Branches of Government? Montesquieu is your three branches of government guy. He's got a 3-syllable last name. Maybe that helps, right? He says, oh, if kings are bad, have 2 other branches of government that could check the power of the king. Right? So in the US, right, we have a president, we have a Congress, we have a Supreme Court. So if one person's doing some little sketch, there's a couple other people in another branch to say no, if that makes any sense. Who is your freedom of speech Enlightenment thinker? Voltaire. So this is all what this document is about. I'm not going to bother reading this. It's very wordy. Historical circumstances that led to it. What is something that was going on in the world that may have motivated this John Locke guy to say, you know what? This is wrong. People need to have a say so that they can solve some of their own problems. The Enlightenment is something we can mention, but remember, John Locke is the Enlightenment. So we kind of have to ask ourselves what was happening first that maybe wasn't so enlightened, that might have caused people to go, I don't like this person in power. I want change. maybe a type of rule associated with one person having all the power, like a King Louis XVI. Absolute power. When you have one person in charge with absolute power, people's rights tend to be violated, right? King Louis violated people's rights. So check this answer out. Write this down. Ready? Absolutism was the type of government used in many European countries, which often denied people rights. Typically, if you live in a country where there's rule by one, you don't have something like freedom of speech, because that person who's in power does not want you to freely express your displeasure with society, because that might be a threat. So I'm just going to have you locked up. In France, just before the French Revolution, if you spoke out against King Louis, he would arrest you and throw you in jail. Does anyone remain, for the sake of making connections and doing review, that big giant prison in Paris where King Louis put all the people he didn't like? The Bastille, right? Bastille. Okay, maybe you want to study your French Revolution stuff, okay? I know that was a long time ago. Here we go. Let's do another sentence where we explain, during the Enlightenment, people criticized absolutism and wanted to replace it with democracy. And that's where I'm making a connection to what I see in the document. Maybe if you had read it, you would have seen that, but I did mention this idea of majority rules. That's what democracy is. Majority is more than half. If more than half of the people in a democratic country want something to happen, it usually happens. Okay, so absolutism and the abuse of power of kings is one of the things that motivated the Enlightenment to happen. Okay, so a tough question, and I think just worth reviewing the content because I know this is fuzzy for you, a lot of you guys. Does anyone have any questions about anything connected to this document, any history stuff? Totalitarianism is like absolutism on steroids, because in a totalitarian society, it's ruled by one, and that person controls every single aspect of your life. Like what job you're going to have, where you're going to live, what you learn about in school, what religion you can have, or if you can have a religion at all. Give me a totalitarian leader from Global 10. Communist, big bushy mustache. Stalin. Give me a totalitarian leader from Germany. Hitler, good. Give me a totalitarian leader of North Korea. Kim Jong-un. Okay, if you get a question about North Korea and Kim Jong-un, that name will be in a document. You're not going to have to recall the name of the leader of North Korea, but North Korea operates as a totalitarian dictatorship. So Jean Locke writes this thing in 1690, and now we've jumped ahead in the historical timeline to 1791. It's the French Revolution. Somebody mentioned how the Enlightenment inspired the French Revolution, and it did. The Enlightenment inspired the French Revolution, the American Revolution, which you're going to learn about in 11th grade, the Haitian Revolution, revolutions in South America, in which Simon Bolivar was fighting against Spanish rule. This woman, Olympe de Gouges, is how that's pronounced. French is very difficult. Is basically a woman who said, hey, French Revolution is supposed to be about bringing rights to people instead of having a king. But all these people that are doing the French Revolution stuff are saying this is only going to be about men. When the French Revolution gets started, there was a very famous document that came out called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen in 1789. It pops up on the Regents sometimes. It's basically a French version of the Declaration of Independence, a statement of what's to come. Like, hey, we're about to make a new government in which we're going to have democracy, in which we're going to work together to protect each other's rights. All men should have this. All men should have that. Olympe de Gouges comes around in 1791 and goes, that's a wonderful document. How about we just add, women to the document as well? So men and women can have this, okay? And she's thinking to herself, this should work, right? These are people who are launching a revolution all about people's rights. What's the big deal if we just protect all of their rights, meaning all the people's rights, men and women? 2 years later, I believe, I think 1793, they kill her. So it kind of shows like the hypocrisy a little bit of the French revolutionaries, right? They're saying we want rights, we want freedoms, but not for you women. That's ridiculous, according to the French revolutionaries. And then you get that guy Maximilien Robespierre chopping off everyone's heads if they disagree with the French Revolution. That's committing more human rights violations, right? That's denying people the right to life. I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent. I'm just trying to cover as much stuff as possible. But take a look at this question. This is why I'm doing this, because these are hard. Explain how audience affects what Olympe de Gouges includes in this document. Tell me what audience means. Yeah, the people reading it. It's going to tell you who is reading it always. Okay, so if you were to take a look at the beginning of that document, it gives it. The French Legislative Assembly is who's going to be reading this. She presented it, or rather it was presented to the French Legislative Assembly. This is a good word to know for the Regents and for 11th grade. It wouldn't hurt to know what a legislator does or what the legislative branch of a government does. In the United States, we call it a Congress. They pass laws. So her document, which is basically a statement that people should have rights, that just simply includes the word women alongside the original Declaration of Rights, was sent to French lawmakers. That's the audience. So let's take a look a little bit at the document. Woman is born free and lives equal to man in her rights. Social distinctions can be based only on the common utility. This just basically means differences in status and wealth and power in society should only be based on people's abilities, not what your gender or your sex is. Okay? The purpose of any political association, which is the fancy wording for government, is the conservation of the natural and imprescriptible rights of woman and man. So the whole point of government is to protect rights, not just for men, but also of women. These are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. This is taking John Locke's ideas and just building upon them. So let's start with who the audience is, because that's how I recommend answering these things, is start by telling the reader who is going to read the document. So let's write this down. Ready? De Gouges, actually, I'll keep it simple. The author's audience was the French, I'm just going to paraphrase, legislative branch, period. I'm identifying the audience. So let's think about this for a second. Why would anyone want to talk to a member of Congress here in the US? Because people do this all the time. They call them lobbyists. They go to the Capitol building and speak to members of Congress. What might be their purpose? If we know what they do in a legislative branch, why am I talking to members of a legislative branch in a democracy? What am I looking to accomplish? Okay, maybe to make something fair and equal. And what could a member of Congress do to make something fair and equal? Yeah, pass a law, maybe guaranteeing it. So here's what I'm going to say here. Check this out. It's going to make sense once I write it down. Therefore, comma, she discussed how women's rights should be protected, comma, since the legislators started the revolution with the intent to protect rights not given by the king, right? In her mind, these are the people who should be receptive to her ideas because they said, we're going to start this revolution in the first place to protect people's freedoms. Okay, so she's just mentioning, hey, you guys left some people out. So here's what women want. That's all. She's looking to educate people about the desires of women. They want rights too. The next question is cause and effect. Does someone remember from last time or from class a good way to go about doing a cause and effect question? Document 1's the cause, document 2's the effect. So explain how 1 led to 2. Okay? Document 1 is John Locke and the Enlightenment. Doc 2 is a woman saying, I should have rights. Tell me, what's the connection? Okay, one possible explanation is that the Enlightenment inspired women to start demanding rights, like a Mary Wollstonecraft. Good call, she was an Enlightenment thinker. So the Enlightenment would inspire women to be more active in society and demand more rights and freedoms. You could also use as an explanation that the Enlightenment inspired the French Revolution and people starting to make demands for more rights instead of just living the status quo. So I would recommend always, when you do these, do at least 2 sentences, but no more than 3. Don't go crazy. We should not be filling up the page. I think I mentioned that last time. Start by stating the main idea from document 1 and that it led to the main idea from document 2. So if you had to sum up the main idea from document 1 in your own words, what would you tell me document 1 is about? John Locke says people are born with natural rights and he wants what kind of government? Democracy. So here we go. Let's say John Locke stating people should have rights in a democracy. That's the main idea from document 1. Led to women in France Olympe de Gouges was a woman in France. I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. Demanding that women are also protected, which is the main idea from document 2. This is because, here's my explanation, because it does say explain, women such as Mary Wollstonecraft argued that women should have equal opportunities and access to education. That's one possible explanation. Another explanation could be this led to the French Revolution, in which people overall were demanding more rights and freedoms. Mary Wollstonecraft was another Enlightenment thinker. Okay? As long as you make some kind of an attempt to explain the connection, that's all. That's all we have to worry about. You could also say something, I'm not going to write it down, but you could also say this inspired women to criticize the French Revolution because only men's rights were being protected. You could say that too, but I'll keep it simple for now. I think it's worth doing the next one because there's a hard question here about the concept of bias. Fortunately for us, the subject matter for the next one is very easy, so we don't have to bother reading the document right now. It is an excerpt from notes taken by General Lieutenant Liebman as he was listening to a speech by Adolf Hitler. So it's a dude listening to a speech given by Hitler, and he's taking notes about the speech. So it's almost like it's the speech of Hitler, but it's just someone's notes about it. In the year 1933. 1933, is that before or after World War II? Before. So tell me what life was like in Germany before World War II and before Hitler. What was going on? There's a lot of stuff you could possibly say. Germany was in shambles in the 20s and early 30s. Excellent. How come? World War I? Beautiful. Elaborate. Yes, Germany had to pay reparations. Tell me about this word reparations. Yeah, money they're forced to pay for repairs. The British and the French are ticked off with Germany. So when the Treaty of Versailles is signed, they force Germany to pay billions and billions of dollars, like $500 billion in 2026 money. This hurts Germany because they had debt that they could not pay. They start printing money to pay off their debts. What happens if you just create money out of thin air? What happens to the value of the money? It doesn't have any value, and everything all of a sudden becomes very expensive. What's the word we use for when everything becomes more expensive in a society? Inflation. German inflation was out of control. Okay? So the German economy is bad. So Hitler rises to power on the back of blaming the Treaty of Versailles for all Germany's problems and blaming people for Germany's loss in World War I, which caused the Treaty of Versailles to be signed. This should be easy, I hope. Who is Hitler's primary target for scapegoating when it comes to Germany's problems? The Jews, okay? He tapped into pre-existing anti-Semitism in Germany and said, Germany lost World War I because Jewish people caused Germany to surrender, and Jewish people signed the Treaty of Versailles, and now we have all these problems. So this document is about fighting against the Treaty of Versailles by going against it. Remember, it wasn't just reparations. What else was Germany forced to do in the Treaty of Versailles other than coughing up bucks? They had to drastically reduce the military, right? 100,000 troops, which is nothing in a military for a country. What else? Give up their overseas colonies in Africa and Asia. What happened to a certain type of boat that the Germans loved to use? What was the type of boat that Germany loved in World War I? Yeah, U-boats. No more U-boats for Germany. No more Air Force for Germany. And Germany was forced to accept full blame for World War I, when we should know that this was not only Germany's fault. What's one of the other causes for World War I? The assassination. A Serbian guy murdered an Austrian guy, and now we're blaming Germany in full for World War I. Okay, so a lot of German people were unhappy about that. So they want to fight against Versailles. They want to reconquer the land they've lost because Hitler says that the living space for German people is too small. They want to build up their armed forces because what they were left with after the Treaty of Versailles was seen as being inadequate. They said that's necessary for regaining their political power. Okay, they also want to reintroduce national service, which is code for every German, able-bodied German, must be in the military. We often call this a draft or compulsory military service. He wants to bring that back. Okay, and again, this common theme here, a conquest of new living space for German people, in this case to the east. He's already has his eyes set on places like Poland and Russia. Cool. Historical circumstances should be easy. What was going on, we just went over it, that would have led Hitler to say, we need to conquer more land and violate the Treaty of Versailles. So here we go. Let's do the backstory. The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany by forcing it to pay reparations. Again, sorry about the chicken scratch. I'm just trying to go really fast. And by taking away its overseas territories, aka colonies. This caused hardship for Germany that Hitler wanted to, I'll just say, address. Fancy word for solve. That's what the document's about. Hitler's addressing of Germany's problems by basically breaking the law, by breaking Germany's promise to follow the Treaty of Versailles. And Hitler was just counting on the fact that countries were too weak from World War I to stand up to him. And he was right for a long time. For the sake of review and tangents, what's the key word from this unit that refers to people just giving in to the bully, letting him do whatever he wants? Appeasement, right? He thought everyone would just appease him because then no one was interested in doing another world war. And for a long time, he was right. Remember, circumstances is backstory. Germany's punishment with the treaty is what's leading to Hitler saying, we got to scrap it. We got to reconquer our land. The next document is talking about Japan around the same time period. And this is an important one to do because it's got a complicated question about bias. So maybe we start with that. What does it mean if someone's biased? Yeah, it's leaning to one side, right? Maybe showing favoritism. I would expect a Japanese person to show favoritism to his own country, right? Maybe promote it, maybe hide the truth about any negative aspect of his country, perhaps. So our job is to detect and show the bias that this guy has. To do that, we might want to talk about what he left out, right? If you're being one-sided on something, it means you're not telling the whole part of the story. So that's what we have to look for here. What part of the story is being missing? That's a key component, a key strategy going into a bias question is ask yourself, what is he not saying? And this one, I will read some of it because I think this is important. Hashimoto was a colonel in the Imperial Japanese Army and the founder of a Japanese ultra-nationalist society. This excerpt is from a speech he delivered in response to criticism of Japan's expansion into Manchuria. Manchuria is in China. Japan in the 1930s is expanding its empire. Japan is a place that lacks natural resources. They were looking to get coal and iron from nearby China. Manchuria is part of China. We have already said that there are only 3 ways left to Japan to escape from the pressure of surplus population. Japan is small and tiny. A lot of those islands are covered by mountains. So this is the guy saying there's only a couple of ways that we could deal with this problem of having a small place and a lot of people. We are like a great crowd of people packed into a small and narrow room. And there are only 3 doors through which we might escape, namely emigration. What does it mean to emigrate? To leave your country and go somewhere else. Immigrant is the person coming in. To emigrate is going out, to leave. Advance into world markets and expansion of territory. The first door, emigration, has been barred to us by the anti-Japanese immigration policies of other countries. So he's saying, all right, we have a lot of people in Japan. A lot of people are looking to leave to find home somewhere else, but countries around the world are not willing to accept Japanese people. That's his claim here. The second door, advance into world markets, is being pushed shut by tariff barriers and the discontinuation of commercial treaties. So this guy's saying Japanese people can't even sell Japanese stuff in other countries because other countries are using tariffs to make Japanese products very expensive. If Japanese products get very expensive, people stop buying Japanese stuff. What should Japan do when 2 of the 3 doors have been closed against her? It's quite natural that Japan should rush upon the last remaining door. It may sound dangerous when we speak of territorial expansion, but the territorial expansion of which we seek does not, in any sense of the word, involve the occupation of the possessions of other countries. Highlight this, and I'll tell you why. The planting of the Japanese flag thereon, and the declaration of annexation to Japan. This guy is straight up saying that Japanese territorial expansion will not involve taking over places where people already live or places that people already control. We know this to not be true because in 1937, his country had already invaded Manchuria, which was controlled by China. He's leaving that detail out. Is this an example of bias? It is. He's talking about how great and wonderful his country is and how it has all these problems. Japan is the victim. It needs to solve its issues, and we don't do anything wrong. We don't take over any lands that someone else already owns. He leaves out this. Therefore, he is showing bias. Let's write down an answer. We're going to put the author was in the Japanese army. Therefore, he sides with the needs of his own country and leaves out facts that portray Japan in a negative way. For example, comma, he leaves out that Japan had conquered Chinese land, right? He's saying how great and wonderful Japan is. When we expand, we never take over any places that someone else already owns. He leaves out this key detail that they already did that. Okay, he's trying to make Japan look like they're being bullied, but Japan's being the bully. He's leaving that part of the story out. So again, when you do a bias question, if you get one, these are not easy. Try to ask yourself what part of the story is missing. Fortunately, if you looked closely enough at the beginning here, it gave it to you. Okay, so oftentimes kids, when they get to the regions, they might skip the information at the bottom. They might skip the information at the top. Had you guys read this, or had people read this, they would have seen that Japan already conquered some land that someone else already owned. But he's saying that they don't ever do that. Our good old buddy, our good old pal. I love these questions, personally. I think this is way easier than cause and effect. But one thing I'm going to say, and kids always screw this up, is look what it says here. Similarity or difference. Sometimes kids do both. And if you do both, you might not do a great job at doing both. And the reader will just look at the first part of your answer and take that as your answer. They're not allowed to accept both halves of your answer. So just do one of these things and do a good job. This is a 3-sentence job. The first thing you have to do is state very clearly how the documents are similar or different, and then give a fact. It could be paraphrased. I would recommend that. I wouldn't recommend massive quotes. A fact from each that backs it up. So if you were to just, re-glance at these things, talking about what Hitler's discussing here, and what this Hashimoto guy is discussing here, for me personally, similarity is what jumps out. So if I were to say their documents are more similar than different, how are they similar? What are they both talking about in these documents, generally speaking? Land and the need to get more of it. Beautiful. So that's how we start. We're going to identify a similarity, not both, just the similarity. So here we go. Both documents. You could also say, if you want to be wordier, the documents are similar because, but this works too. Show a desire to expand power and territory, period. I got 1 point out of 2 already. So now we just have to give an example from each document that supports this. So if I'm going to say that both show a desire to expand in power and territory, I got to either quote or paraphrase something from here that shows a desire for power and territory, maybe something about Germany's land being too small, right? And therefore we need to conquer land in the east. Maybe I say that. And then maybe for this one, I say something about, I don't know, Japan is kind of small and its own people are not allowed to emigrate and therefore they need more territory too. So here's how I'm going to word all that to make it short and sweet, because that's what you want to do on these, because you got to spend as much time as you can on that enduring issues essay, in my opinion. For example, my 2 favorite words after White Castle. Hitler in Doc 1 stated that Germany should conquer more living space in the East, period. That is evidence. Evidence does not mean, I think oftentimes, I think I said this last time, evidence does not mean that you need to quote. Evidence is just talking about the facts from history. And I could just take a couple of things I highlighted and turn it into a statement of fact from history. Okay, I think that's better than quoting. Sometimes you might quote the wrong thing. I'm not done though, because I've only given a fact from history from the first document. I gotta do the other one. That's why I think similarity and difference is easy, but it does require 3 sentences. I'll say similarly, good transitional phrase to indicate I'm about to say something that's the same, comma, Hashimoto stated in Doc 2 that Japan needed to expand because Japan is small. That's me paraphrasing him when he says that. What does he say exactly? Japan's a small and narrow room. I'm just paraphrasing, putting it into my own words. Japan is small and has a surplus population. You do that, you're gold. Please, if you get similarity and difference, and there's a very high likelihood of that. Normally in June, you'll get a cause and effect and a similarity or difference. Don't do both. Do one well. If you do both, you're gonna have like a whole page of text here, and it's not gonna be good. One or the other, similarity or difference, not both.